Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Not a Scooby Podcast. Today we are joined by Jack Geddes, the concert photographer who has worked with some of the biggest names in music. For example, Billie Eilish, My Chemical Romance and Panic at the Disco. Not to mention, Jack has also worked at some of the UK's biggest music festivals. So it's safe to say that he has a lot of experience to share and a lot of advice to give. So, in this week's episode, we're going to discuss what Jack needs from artists to make the best out of their time together, to give them photos that they're proud to share and that they feel like they look their best. Because Jack can do a lot behind the camera, but he also needs the performance to make them look their best. Additionally, we talk about the value of having your own distinctive style. For example, Jack has a really grungy, almost damaged look to his photos that make things look distinctively Jack. You come across one of Jack's photos and you know that must have been Jack Geddes that took that and edited it. So we talk about the value of that and having a clear brand. And finally, any other advice that Jack has for people looking to get into this incredibly competitive industry. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode and thank you so much for listening. Hi, Jack, and thank you for joining me on this week's episode of the Not a Scooby Podcast. Let's just jump straight to things with my first question, which is, how much time do you really get during a concert to take your photos?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Been really excited to be on this. And honestly, the answer to the question is it kind of depends. I kind of break it down into like 3 different levels, to be honest. And all of them are very valuable. So the different levels are not anything to do with it, like how valuable people are to like the industry and stuff. It just depends. It's the different levels of access that you get. So when it, like, if you're working as a press photographer, for example, you're working for a newspaper, a magazine, online kind of like review outlets and stuff like that. You're usually given you're given the most amount of reels. So for example, it's most of the time it's first 3 songs, no flash. So if you ever hear people like saying first 3 no flash, it's basically what they're saying. And it just means you get the first 3 songs in the photo pit if there is a photo pit, and then after that most artists will allow you to shoot from the crowd and stuff like that, but you don't get the same kind of access as you would get like further up the kind of access levels. And artists will impose more rules on you, especially if their management decide that it is worth imposing stricter regulations on people, maybe less songs or maybe no photo pit access at all. That's happened multiple times before to me, and sometimes they're totally cool with you just doing whatever you want. I think 30 Seconds to Mars or something like that. I heard something about them like allowing photographers on stage for one song, which is unheard of for a band that kind of size. It's pretty insane. But the kind of next level is when you're working for like the venue or the promoter of the show. And promoters will tend to like want the content of the show and hire like photographers and videographers and stuff like that to capture the content. And at that point, artists, like especially the kind of mid-level artists, get very excited that there's like the venue or the promoter kind of want to make more content, and sometimes they'll actually give you more access. Like for example, I was shooting the Saw Doctors recently at the Barrowlands, and they were more than happy to have me like to give me a AAA pass, which that's what it stands for, access all areas. They were more than happy to give me that and let me just do whatever I like, which is great. And you don't always get that. Sometimes you are just treated like the normal like press photographer, first 3 songs, no flash. But when you're working for one of these for a promoter or a venue or anything like that, then you tend to get a little bit more leeway and stuff like that sometimes, especially when it comes to video, because as a press photographer, most bands, not most bands, but a lot of bands don't really like people videoing them. So like Chemical Brothers are notorious for really not liking people filming their concerts. So they'll play festivals and then the video team are not allowed to film it because their entire show is around like having these big visuals that they can't like redo overnight. Whereas like a punk band can play a totally different show every single night. Theirs is like stuck to these visuals. And if you see the visuals, then there's kind of no point going, I think, is the idea behind it. So they're happy with photos, but if you take video of them without their permission, you can easily just get like told to leave. So just basically if you're not approved for video, don't do it. just take photos. Then you get to like the high level, which I think is the obvious one of working for the artist, and it really just comes down to like whatever you and the artist decide is necessary or whatever they're comfortable with. I like most artists I've worked with are quite happy and just been like, yeah, go do whatever you want, just get the content, and that's great. Like I was on tour with Nathan Evans and St. Phoenix, and they were great. They're just like, yeah, come on the stage, get in our faces, just like make cool stuff. I was like, sick. But of course, some artists aren't always like happy with that. They'll tell you what they like and what they're comfortable with and stuff like that, and that just makes my job easier, to be honest. So yeah, I was kind of got at 3 different levels. So really, the answer to that question is it depends where you're kind of at, because that's kind of what happens. So.
So going back to that initial level, so you, as you said, you've got the location potentially hiring you or the band, but that initial one where there's far more restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not the venue hiring you. Are you going along and just saying, hey, I want to be in the pit for the first 3 songs?
Yeah, so there's a variety of different ways you can get in through that. So some ways you can, like, when you email the artist's PR, they organize all the press passes and stuff like that for reviewers, photographers, that sort of thing. Sometimes you can just email them and say, hey, I'd really like to shoot this for myself, and they'll let you in. But most like bigger artists won't need you to be under an outlet that will post the photos on like a website and, you know, do a review as well. So that's like a really surefire way of getting in. If you can get in with a press outlet, there's a lot of free ones. You just work for free, and people just do it because they love going to gigs. There's lots of them, and there's lots of ways to get in that way. Another way is like it's a lot more uncommon nowadays, but like if you're shooting for like a newspaper or something like that, or you're shooting freelance kind of press, so you'd go and take photos of the artist and then sell them off afterwards. That's still a way to get in, but it's a lot rarer nowadays because artists really have to just not care about where those photos go, essentially. Whereas like if the artists have been in the news for whatever reason, their management might decide that having people who come in freelance press trying to sell photos to everybody could actually be a danger to them and to their image. You don't want someone coming to the show and making your artist look really unhealthy and like they're having a bad time, and then have the press like say horrible things. So that's become a lot more uncommon. But working for newspapers, while still pretty uncommon as opposed to like doing free press nowadays, so you don't tend to get paid for it, unfortunately. Like it still exists, but like if you're getting in through press, you're mostly going through a press outlet who will post reviews and photos online, and you won't get paid for it.
And is that how you got started doing free work? Because that's been a topic of conversation that's come up quite a lot on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Being that for me personally, I know for a fact that if I didn't do some free passion projects, then I wouldn't get the opportunities I do today, because it was those projects, that portfolio, that my now client saw and thought, oh yeah, I like this guy, let's work with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I started just by shooting like I started out like from the very beginning just shooting friends bands. I went to college to be a musician, not a photographer, actually. So I have a totally different upbringing in terms of like doing what I do now. But I started just shooting friends bands, and I think that's one thing that if anybody is looking to get into this kind of field, like why not message your friend's band and just be like, hey, do you want a photographer for your next gig? Or hey, do you want me to come down to your practice space and take some photos of you? It's like it's a really, really easy way to get in. Even if they have a photographer that is like their photographer, they just, if you're like, hey, I just want to get more experience, surely your pals will let you in. I think that's the easiest way to get experience. But once you've kind of built up a little bit of a portfolio, then most press outlets will start to let you in, and that lets you build up another big portfolio. You get to shoot artists that you really like. Like, for example, I think one of the first gigs I ever shot was like through a press outlet, was like YungBlud, for example. And that was way above what I was doing before. And I also have to give a shout out to an absolute legend in the Glasgow music scene. He was the booker for Room 2. His name's David Blair. And when I was getting into photography, he messaged me out of the blue. And he was like, hey, I heard you're like trying to get into like doing some music photography. I've got a few gigs at Room 2. Would you like to come and take photos of them? And I was like, Absolutely, because it was like post lockdown. No, it was like the first few gigs back, and the very very first gig I did, I met my friend and kind of like long term client Ben Walker. It was his first ever Glasgow gig. He played to maybe like 20 or 30 people, just played a bunch of covers. And now, when it comes to February, he's going to be headlining St. Luke's, which is like a 600, 800 capacity kind of venue in Glasgow. So I have to say thank you to David, because the reason that I get to work with so many like clients now is because I met Ben at that very first gig that I shot. So we're doing free work is great, because you actually, in this field, you're meeting people that might hire you in the future. In fact, Ben hired me for the next week to do like promo shots for him, and that is rare. It doesn't always happen, but it's like doing your free work lets you build up a portfolio. Then you get into, you can do bigger free work stuff that looks a lot cooler than just like a pub gig or something like that. Or you can actually just meet people who think you're that good off the bat that they want to hire you. It happens. I've done tons of like free kind of like, I call it spec work. But if you do that kind of spec work, then you eventually build up a portfolio of things that people actually want to hire you for. And it is so important in the music industry to build that up, because no one's going to hire you if like you don't have any proof that you're good, you know. And being in a band is expensive as it is. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's often my number one counter argument to people that say, like, under no circumstances you should ever do free work. But then I'm just thinking, if you have zero social proof or proof that you're any good at what you're doing, and let's say someone does pay you for what you do,
Yeah.
then in all likelihood they will actually end up being quite unhappy with what has been delivered, because you don't have a great deal of experience and you don't have that clear portfolio. So with a portfolio, it's difficult to give an exact number. How many concerts, how many projects does someone need to be happy with before you think that, okay, you've got enough of a portfolio now that you can start charging for your work, and you should be confident in that?
Yeah, I would say it's like, I mean, if you can shoot as many like concerts as possible, like as many gigs as possible, just kind of get like, just figure it out in your early days before you have to start getting paid and stuff like that, because there's a lot of different things you can do wrong at a gig. Like if you don't know the first 3 no flash rule for some gigs, and you end up shooting 4 songs and you're using flash the entire time, people just start to not like you. Sometimes they'll be okay with it, and other times if it can get you like blacklisted off lists. It is quite serious, even though they're they don't seem like that serious kind of rules. They're pretty adamant about it, and you don't want security annoying you or like throwing you out the venue basically. But I would say is like, if you can shoot as many gigs as possible, and then if you've got like a portfolio of like 20 images that you're really happy with, I say 12 to 20 images that you're really happy with and think they're your best work, and just make sure that there isn't more than 2 photos per band, so per artist, to show that you actually have shot a lot more. That's I would say with the minimum is definitely about 12 is like the kind of where you want to start with a portfolio. But if you can have as many as possible that you really like around about 20, following that rule of, you know, no more than 2 per artist, then like I think that's a really great place to start. That's how I manage my portfolio as well. So.
And when you're showcasing your portfolio, is that just on Instagram?
Instagram's a great way of doing it for sure, but I think I'm trying to decide whether it's like really worth it to have a website in 2024 or 2025, like when you're a music photographer, because most people who hire you will be on Instagram. Instagram's a great way to show off kind of what you've done and have a kind of like, it's a little bit like going look at me kind of thing. But the website really, I think, sets people apart from, okay, this guy's professional, to okay, this guy likes posting these photos on Instagram. People aren't going to hire you off your website, but it's something you kind of need to have. It's weird. It's a little bit like musicians saying, "Oh, we don't need band photos because our music is really good." And I'm like, you still need band photos, unfortunately. Your music is really good, but you need band photos, and that's just what it is. Like you kind of just need a website that looks pretty good, and don't have the Wix.site like or like something like that. Just buy a domain. They're not expensive, you know. It's not the most expensive thing. It's just a bit annoying, but you definitely should have a website just to be like, hey, I'm legit. Just for that, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I often find that clients, if they're looking into you individually, specifically, they're already sold on the idea of working with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's more so that people are looking for a reason not to work with you. You've basically made the sale, and they're looking for a reason to not believe
Yeah.
their assumption that you're good enough to work with. So they're just doing a lot of these background checks as proof to make sure, okay, they do have a website, they are legit, they're not sketchy, they don't say anything that I wouldn't agree with online, and they don't have any bad reviews.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Like,
just putting all those things in place. And I agree with you with domains. Even if you're just sending emails, right? Me having hello@jackdarrow.com purely for emails
mm-hmm.
does help me stand out from when I have my sort of personal email address. So even, I don't know, even if you're literally just applying for jobs and you've got that domain for yourname.com,
become very
you just come
memorable.
across. Yeah.
Like like you come across more professional. It's like having an email signature in your emails. Like I guess that's another thing. These are all these the kind of things that come from like being like doing work within a corporate company. They're like, you must have an email signature, and you now have an email with our domain and stuff like that. And when you go freelance, you just totally forget all about that. But having an email signature actually gives you a little bit more. It kind of makes you appear a little bit more legit, and especially when you have the domain as well, you're like, well, someone's actually paid money for that, so they must be legit. Although me saying that, I don't have a domain for my email yet, so I've just been using my normal email. I've got a professional one, I've got a personal one, I've got a professional one that doesn't even have a domain, so
Yeah.
do that. Buy a domain.
Yeah. As much as I say that, honestly, so many of my clients have been long standing to the point that they are using my personal email.
Yeah.
And I'm not really going to go to people and say, oh no, I've switched my email address, because
Yeah.
for them personally, they're not fussed.
Yeah,
As long as
exactly.
as long as the email address isn't purple pineapple
Yeah.
_123@gmail.com.
Yeah, it's
Like
like that's the
it's
exact reason why I've not changed mine. It's like it's not an embarrassing email. Like I'm not gonna give them a personal one because that one is embarrassing. But like my professional one, the one I use for like work and stuff like that, it's just totally fine. It doesn't need to change, and especially not now because I actually if I change it, people will start emailing the wrong email address. So I can't do it now. Apparently, yeah. I'm sure there's a way of forwarding things, but can't be bothered. It
yeah.
works. People know who I am. It's fine.
And what about business cards?
Oh, business cards are kind of weird. I started making business cards when I first kind of like wanted to start doing it as a side hobby. I knew I wanted to do it full time, but when I was just doing it still as a side hustle with my like full time job, I got like maybe 500 business cards made up because they're not expensive. They're so cheap to make and they last you like forever. And I would give them out and stuff, but no one ever kind of called me back from them. I think what's a really cool. I've not tried it, but I think it's a really cool like thing is when these like tappy cards. So it's like you tap your phone on it, and it just comes up with like your like link tree or whatever, or your website. I think that's really cool. I like the idea of that. I've had older people ask if I have business cards and stuff like that, but from my experience, it's just not worth it carrying them around because people generally don't call you back. If someone's really interested, I'll be like, "Oh, I'll give you my phone number right now." And force them to take that because then they'll want to take action. Whereas if they have a number on a piece of paper, they either lose it or they just go, "Oh, I'll do it later." Whereas if it's in their phone, they're like, "Well, I've not really got an excuse. There's no barrier." And that's something I learned from marketing as well. Is like just going off on a tangent here, but if like from a marketing perspective, the easier you can make it for a customer to contact you, to buy from you, to do any kind of work with you, the more likely they are going to do it. If you've got a big button in your bio or whatever that says "Get in touch, hire me now" or whatever, and there's like zero barrier to entry, all you put is your email and your message, and then that's kind of it. Then people are going to message you. If you're like, "Give me your first name, your last name, your email, your phone number, tell me what you want," and it's like people aren't going to do that. people are busy and stuff. People are lazy as well. I'm lazy. I don't want to do that. So like the easier you can make it for someone to get in touch with you, the better. So business cards just don't do it for me. I think the little tappy card was a great idea, but I've not got one. So
Yeah. Hey, maybe 2025 is the year.
maybe, yeah, we little tax write off, just.
Yeah. We are not your accountants. Do not take that as official accountancy advice.
Yeah, there you go. Just low. Just by the way.
Yeah, we are definitely not your accountants. But so Linktree, I've seen this a lot with specifically musicians or concert photographers. For anyone that doesn't know what that is, can you explain that?
I timed that coffee drink well. So yeah, Linktree is like your kind of link in bio type thing. It's just a big page full of all your links in it. Bands use it all the time because it is free and you can put in links to your music, to your socials. And it's one of those things that's kind of expected from any kind of business that's online nowadays. It just puts all your most important links like in one spot. And I say our generation mostly uses Instagram. I'm kind of stay away from Facebook for the most part, and I'm not a big fan of TikTok. Still got it, still use it occasionally. I prefer Instagram. So I think everyone just kind of expects you to, if you've got anything to sell, if you've got anything to like show people, you've got a link tree with all your different things there, and it's just a really handy kind of tool to use. It's totally free and permanent, and you can put it on like business cards. You can put it on a QR code, or you could put it on one of these tappy card things that I was talking about. I don't know, like just a really simple way to put all your like stuff in one place, make it easier for people to get in contact with you and give you money, like just that kind of way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And going back to what you were saying about concerts starting out, you mentioned that there's a lot of things that can go wrong in a concert. One thing that always terrifies me, I've never done concert photography, but one thing is banding.
Banding,
And I'm like,
yeah.
how are you avoiding that flicker from, like, particularly if you're not able to see a rehearsal, how do you know what to expect? Because obviously they're going to have some pretty elaborate light shows throughout.
Oh yeah. So that's I think there's two things. The first one is not going to help a lot of people, to be fair. My camera, I use a Sony A7 IV. It has literally got like that kind of what's it called, variable shutter speed or something like that, and it literally does like 0.3. It's like you say it's like 166.07 or whatever. It's like it's so specific that it's meant to get rid of banding altogether. It doesn't always get rid of banding because you'll have other lights that maybe flicker at a different level. So if anyone's got a Sony A7 IV or any of those kind of newer cameras, set a button for that because you're going to use it a lot as a concert photographer. Maybe not at bigger gigs, but sometimes you will use it. And I'm not a fan of banding. Some people like it. Some people don't like it. I don't like it. So another thing you do is you just play about the shutter speed until it looks less bandy. That's honestly the easiest thing that you can kind of do. And unfortunately, until we all have global shutters, it's just going to be a problem at gigs because there's a lot of venues that have old LED lighting that just flickers a little bit slower than like newer stuff. If you go to like the Barrowlands, something like that, you're not going to get flicker for the most part. Any kind of venue with like maybe slightly older LED lighting, you're going to get it, unfortunately. And it's one of those things that in the moment you just learn to do faster and faster because it's something you have to do often enough. You don't deal with it with every single gig, but it is something that you have to deal with. And the more you do it, the easier it will become to like do it faster. And that's just the long and short of it, really, is the more you practice, the more you do it, the better you'll get. And unfortunately, that's not the not the most fun answer to give because everyone's like, give me hacks now. I want to know how to be good now. I'm like, sorry, it takes a while, unfortunately. Like you just have to invest your time.
Yeah, and for anyone that doesn't know what banding is, it's basically if you've ever taken a photograph and there's almost zebra stripes over your photo. Where I find it most commonly is actually in barbershops.
In
Which is no
barbershops?
disrespect to barbershops who have like poor LEDs, but it's often like the lighting is nice and it works for our clientele, and obviously it's bright enough. there hasn't been necessarily a consideration for when I bring in my content people, when I bring in my photographer,
Mhm.
is that going to be a problem? Because people have hired me for doing photography at their barbershop, and I've told them, like, if there's banding, there's really not much I can do about it. And I've showed up and I've literally taken 2 photos, and I've been like, there's so much banding that it's like
Yeah.
almost impossible to deal with, because as you say, there's so many different sources that are contributing to these zebra stripes. So I
Yeah.
basically just turned around to them and be like,
There's
we can
nothing I can
try
do
we can
here.
try figure something out, but
Mhm.
honestly, it's not worth me hanging around here for 2 hours to take a bunch of photos,
Mhm.
because you're not going to be happy with the end result.
It's like we should probably have like some other lighting that is ours so we can make the most of it, kind of thing. Because there's no point like spending a lot of time with a client if you're like, there is literally nothing we can do to make this content worth how much I'm actually charging you because of the situation that we're in. Like, and that's something you come across as well within music photography, is that maybe bands hire you and they don't sort photo pass for you, they don't sort AAA. And if you're working for a band, they should be sorting the highest pass they possibly can for you. Sometimes it's not possible for them to get you AAA just because the promoter, they might be a support act, and the promoter doesn't want to give AAAs to anyone who doesn't like necessarily need to access absolutely everywhere. I think it's kind of bullshit, to be honest, but understandable. They're the boss, and that's basically it. So if they're like, oh, we didn't sort of pass for you, I'm like, cool, you're still paying me, bro. I've done everything. Everything right. I've done up all my camera stuff. I've got a plan in mind. I know exactly what I'm gonna do. You've not given me what I need to be able to do my work. Like, can't do anything about that. So it's
And
tough, but that's how it was.
and in that regard, what other things should photographers be preparing, and is their responsibility before a concert, and what are things that aren't really their responsibility, and then it is something that they should be asking the artist or the venue to be sorting out for them?
I think it's really the photographer's responsibility to kind of, well, first of all, to bring all their equipment. Like if you're not bringing anything, and the artist is like, oh, hey, we really want this kind of shot, and we know you can do it because we've seen your photos before, and then you've not brought that piece of equipment, you should probably have brought it. But at the same time, I think it's mainly down to photographers just to be like, hey, is there anything you specifically want? Because then you can prepare exactly what you need to bring and everything like that. It's down to photographers really to ask their clients what they want, and then if the clients come back with like a really shit answer, then that's on them. But if they come back and they're like, yeah, we want this, 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 you're like, oh, sick, I've got a list of things to do now. I don't have to like work it out. I know exactly the points I need to hit. And that was what it was like, again, working with Nathan Evans and St. Phoenix. Is I had a call with Al, the drummer, and he was like, we need 40 photos a night. We need lots of video clips. We'll give you all the songs. We'll give you a set list every night, and we'll tell you what we kind of need. And it was like a couple shows in, and he was like, perfect, that's exactly what we're looking for. And that was just because we had that call and that interaction where we both knew exactly what we needed to do. So that, I would say, is probably the most important thing that a photographer or a videographer within the music scene can hold themselves accountable to. Because once you've asked all that question, it's totally down to the client. And if they give you nothing, there's nothing you can do about it. But you asked, so you look really good, as if you were really prepared. So
Yeah, I think for any creative collaboration, the preparation is everything, because
absolutely, yeah.
on both sides, the client and also the creative make so many assumptions about the other person, about what they like and don't like and what they're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that is also coming from the natural laziness that everyone has, of it would be easier just to assume than to ask the question and to follow up and get clarity on something.
Yeah, I think it also comes from a little bit of social awkwardness as well, because one of the things that maybe people don't really talk about a lot, actually, within this kind of the kind of creative industries, especially, is there is a lot more people who suffer from anxiety, and there's people also who are more likely to be on the spectrum, like myself. I'm autistic. I mask pretty well. I've known about it for years, but definitely when I was first starting out, it's like sometimes you just don't ask questions because you don't know the time to like go and ask. gigs are busy, and that's just for neurotypical people. So like, imagine you've got like you've got some anxiety, or you're autistic, you get ADHD or something like that. Like you don't really know kind of when to ask. It's like it's very easy to miss those kind of things. But the best thing you can do is just go and ask. What's the worst thing that can happen? They just say, "I'm busy just now. Come back." Cool. Come back later. It's going to be so worth like your time just to bother them a little bit and find out what you need. And honestly, if you go on, you get a little bit arrogant about it. You go, "Hey, I need to know now. It's my job, right?" And I think if you build that up of going, "This is my job. People are paying me to do this. They are paying me to ask questions and find out exactly what they want. That's what they're paying you to do." And whether you're doing it as a free thing for your pal, as a like just a favor or something, at least ask them what they kind of want and stuff like that. Unless you've already just like discussed before that you're going to do your own thing because it's for yourself, and that's fine. But like if you're working for someone, just ask, because it's going to make your life so much easier after the fact. You're not going to get questions of, "Oh, did you get this?" Like, yes, I got that because you told me to get it. So.
Mm-hmm. And not only in pre-production, but as you've alluded to, on the actual day of filming or taking photos, if there is ever anything that goes a bit pear-shaped, I don't wait to tell the client. I'm telling them now so that they can either make a decision now on what else to do, or I'm going to take the lead. But let's say if I'm even filming an interview and there's noise in the background, people are chatting and laughing away, having a birthday party in the other room. I'm not thinking, "Oh, I'll tell them later about this. I'll tell them in the edit. Oh, by the way, well, obviously there was that birthday party, so that's going to be a problem." Because your client may well just be assuming that that's not a problem because your microphones are that good. I thought it would clean it up, and I'll tell them, no, that will be a problem. So we can either keep going because we don't want to disrupt the birthday party, or we disrupt them and say, "Sorry guys, can we be quiet?" So we get the best audio. So it's just a matter of the client identifying what is the priority. But you need to give them that opportunity to do so, because often what will happen is you email them after the fact saying, "Oh, well, of course that audio was a problem." And they're like, "Oh, well, if you just told me, I would have done something about it." So so it's tricky, but absolutely what you're saying about
if like
it's also a personality.
if you see something that is going wrong or something like that, it's like you're absolutely well within your rights to be like, "Hey, this is not ideal. This is what would be ideal. Can we do this?" And if they say no, you're like, "Cool, you can just deal with the consequences of not doing what I've said is best," and that's fine, I think, to be honest. But like then you get just one thing you always get when it comes to music is, "Oh, hey, did you get this? Did you get that song?" And a lot of the time it's like maybe artists that I've only worked with maybe like once or twice, and I'm like, "Bro, I don't know your songs. I don't know if I got it. I have to look through it and look for it. And if I didn't get it, it's because you didn't tell me to get it." Like I did a concert recently where there was like a massive set list and I never got it. I had no idea when the songs were being played, like when we're going into a break, when there was going to be like an end. I didn't know anything, so I just kind of shot for what I could, and did what we discussed beforehand. And then I got messages like weeks after just going, "Oh, hey, did you get this?" And I'm like, "Well, maybe." If you're lucky, I might have got it, but if you didn't tell me, like it didn't give me a set list, then there's probably not like probably didn't get it, or maybe I did. It's kind of 50-50. But that was one of those cases where I couldn't ask the artist about things because he was running about all the place, and just didn't have time to speak to me. So that's a tricky situation and not an ideal one, but it is what it is. You just get gigs like that sometimes.
So potentially, if there are any artists, musicians, bands listening to this podcast, what advice do you have for them for being better clients?
Well, there's like obviously there's things you can do beforehand and stuff like that, and just like in terms of just being a good client. So like make sure you sort passes out, and make sure you one of the things you can do actually is sort AAA passes properly. One of the best things you can do, like see if a promoter's being funny about you bringing a photographer, just count how many people you've got in the band that you don't need passes and add one more on. It's like if you get 5 people in the band, just go, "Hey, we need 6 passes," because they won't even like ask. They'll be like, cool, you need 6 passes. There you go. And then there's a photographer there, and then that's it, and no one will question it from there on. So that's a really great little trick. Like, if they're going to be funny about having a photographer, sometimes there's actually no reason for it, and most of the time there is no reason for it. So that's a great wee trick. Another thing you can do is just like give me all the details of what's supposed to happen. Like, as soon as you find out when sound check is, tell me. As soon as you find out when doors are, when your set times are, like, let me know. And just kind of also maybe think to yourselves, like, do I need just photos, or do I want some video, and what do I want video of if I'm asking for video? Because nowadays, like, as much as highlight reels look awesome, they just don't do as well on Instagram. So there's no point paying someone to do just a highlight reel for you. You post it once, it doesn't get a lot of views, and you've wasted your money. If you get someone to do a highlight reel plus a bunch of little clips, well, it's not going to be much more expensive. It's just little clips. It's like editing a photo. All you do is mix the audio very quickly, and then, like, I just EQ it, compress it, add a bit of reverb, and then and it's dead quick, and you just cut up the clips. It's just like editing photos. So it's not much more expensive, but you get way more out of it. So I think about that, like, when it comes to being a good client, not just to give me more money, but more like give yourself like more value, because I know it's expensive to hire a photographer. I'm in a band, and it sucks when I have to spend money like that. But like, it's one of those things that you need to think about. If you're going to spend that much money, think about how you can get the most value out of it. You want me to come for sound check? Cool, that's literally included in my price. Like, you want me to do promo photos for you? Sick. Let's set aside time when we're there, and we'll do a couple promo photos, because I enjoy doing them, and I enjoy hanging out with the band and stuff like that. So, like, just ask those kind of questions, like, can we do this? Can we do that? And get the most value out of it. And probably the last thing you can do to be a good client is just look really cool on stage. Just go for it. Don't look boring. Don't stand there and just go, yeah, just playing my guitar. This is fine. Literally jump about, have a good time. Like, you're there. You're not a musician. You're a performer. If you're playing a gig, like a normal rock or a pop gig, you're not a musician. You're a performer. If you're at a jazz gig, okay, fine. You're going to stand there like, go, that's fine. You're in a metal band, most likely, if you're working with me, apparently. Like, run about the stage, like, go mental, because it's going to look really cool in photos. It'll look even cooler in video. So it's just like, do yourself a favor, make yourself look cool before the photographer tries to make you look cool. Because I can make you look cool in photos regardless of what you look like, but in video it's a little bit harder to make someone just standing there still look really good. They look a bit static.
Yeah. So have you ever had that where someone's actually been pretty mundane on stage, and then they're like, why don't I look cool? It's like, well, I've only photographed, I've only captured what I can. Like, I'm not a magician. I have had that a couple times, bearing in mind way in the past now, and we did then just go on to have like a regular conversation about it. But yeah, if they don't have that energy, if they don't have that charisma, then that's all that's going to translate onto the camera. As much as you say you can do a lot in the edit to make something look cool and like a sort of film poster.
Like, lighting is everything to make someone look cool. Like, I can make them look mysterious and like silhouetted and kind of cool with that, or I can make it look really intense with like full on flash and stuff like that. It's like, there are ways to make it look cool without them being really cool. But the truth is like, if you're already like bringing the energy that your music should have, then you're going to look cool regardless, and it's going to make my job a lot easier and make the photos a lot better. I can work around you being static on stage if that's what you want. That's totally fine. But people are going to come back and going, why don't I look cool? It's like, well, I told you exactly why. You need to move. You need to have a good time and just kind of perform, not just play the songs, but actually go out there and entertain people. That's what the music industry is all about, and people forget about that.
Moving on from that, Jack, you mentioned that being there for sound check and various other things is also part of your day rate. So in a typical concert day, how long do you actually spend at the venue and with the band?
So if I'm there from sound checks, a lot of bands don't necessarily need someone else like there for the sound check and stuff like that. Like, if I am there, it's like, sound check usually starts around about kind of like 4 or 5 o'clock, just depending on the venue. Much bigger venues, like if you're shooting at the Hydro, for example, your sound check could be like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, even like midday. Like you'll be surprised just how early some of the sound checks actually go. But in terms of like if you're like at King Tut's in Glasgow, doors are usually at 8 o'clock, and they can't start making noise until after 5 o'clock because they're right next to a bunch of offices. In fact, the promoter who owns King Tut's DF Concerts, their offices are right above King Tut's, so they don't want any noise going before they finish, which is fair. So they have a little bit later sound check, but it's usually around about kind of like 3 or 4 o'clock is kind of low down sound check time for supports at most kind of venues. But if I'm not going to be needed for then, like say the band just they don't want me there because it's extra hassle to like go and have to like look after someone else like and get their passes sorted then as well, then I'll just turn up just before doors because it gives me enough time to speak to the band then and like get all that information that I need from them. So if you're there from say like sound check until like the end of the night, especially if it's like a headline gig and a big gig for that artist, maybe a one-off, then you can easily be there from like 3 o'clock to like 11, half 11, depends how much time you want to spend hanging out with the band, I guess. So it can be a long day for sure, and rates kind of depend on like the kind of size of the band. If you've got a bigger band and you're spending the entire day there, you're going to get a proper rate. If you're a smaller band, doesn't have a lot of money, I'm not going to like ridiculously overcharge you just because being in a band is so expensive already as it is, and they're not going to be making very much money anyway. But I still want paid somewhat fairly for my work. So yeah, there's a bit of a balancing act there. But gigs are long days, and festivals are even longer. So.
Mm-hmm. I think that's potentially a misconception, particularly that I had myself. I assume you literally just showed up, 10 minutes before the gig,
Yeah.
and just hung around exactly for the gig, or even say, like you said, just those 3 songs, no flash.
Yeah, you can definitely do that as well. There's situations where I'm like for example, I work for the Hydro from time to time, and my gig rate doesn't like come down because I'm doing 3 songs. Like if you want me there for longer, it's like cool, that covers it, but that's how much you're paying me, unfortunately. So like you can easily be paid about 100 quid for doing 3 songs for these kind of big venues and stuff like that, or like even just turn up and just turn up 10 minutes before the set before they go on stage, and then leave immediately after, and that can still be you can still make £100 out of that. It's like it totally depends on what the band want and what you're willing to do. If you want to be paid a little bit more to do that all that time, cool, you do that. It all comes down to what you prefer. But like that's what I do is I will I've got a base rate and it covers these kind of things. If you want me there for less time, cool. If you want me there for more time, we can discuss that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So how long were you doing concert photography before you started charging for it?
I would say it's like the first time I ever got paid for doing like a concert was like right before lockdown. So I wasn't doing it for very long, but it was a friend's band, and basically the other friend that got me into photography, we kind of like shot a lot of gigs together. He couldn't make the gig; he was already making money off of some of these things, and so the band just paid me, but that was kind of a one-off. So it's like you can make money pretty early on, but it's not one of those things where it's like it wasn't really seen as being my job at that point. The fact that I got a little bit of money out of that was great because I did want to do it for a living, and that was a really good first step in able to do that. But it wasn't until probably at the end of 2021 where I started regularly getting paid to do things. Not a lot, but like it was no longer a case of am I getting paid? It's a case of you've asked me to do work, you're giving me money. Like, and I think having that relationship is great. If you ask someone to do something, if hey, can I shoot photos for you? You shouldn't be charging them. Like you're asking them for a favor. If you go to them and if they come to you and they're like, hey, can you shoot some photos? Then my response to that is, okay, then you're paying me. And in my head, I'm not saying that to them going, okay, you're paying me. Maybe not the best client retainer like tactic there, but that's the kind of relationship you can have with that. So yeah, it was around about I probably shooting for about 2 years, and with lockdown in the middle, so maybe about a year, I guess, before I was actually like charging for it. But if you're good enough, you can start charging immediately. Like as long as you've got a portfolio and you get social proof to like back up. I mean, social proof for anybody who doesn't know about it is basically just other people saying that you're good. Like if people are hiring you, and another person sees that, that's social proof. So yeah, if you've got a portfolio and some social proof that you're good at what you do, yeah, you can start charging immediately. Like it totally depends for everyone. No one's journey is exactly the same. So
And do you ask your clients for reviews when you finished a project?
I used to do it quite a lot actually, but as I've gotten busier, I've kind of become kind of worse at it, which is hilarious because one of my like biggest kind of jobs working at like a marketing consultancy was helping with like the automation that we did to ask people for reviews, or like just going and asking like for kind of clients we worked with for a long time to give us reviews. So I can do it, and I have systems in place to do it. It's just when you've got so much work and you are like the one person that works for your business, you run out of time, and things things tend to kind of take over. Like if you doing actual work that makes you money has a much higher kind of priority than doing stuff that is really good on the back end. And like if you look at your website and you got all these reviews and they're all recent and they're 5 stars, brilliant. That's great, but it doesn't make you money immediately. And sometimes you just have to focus on the things that are making you money. And then January, February, nothing on. Cool, I'm doing my spreadsheets and I'm asking people for reviews. I'm like just doing all the stuff that I've not had time to do over the last like 6 months. So that's generally kind of what happens. But yeah, I ask for reviews all the time. It's just depends on how busy I am, really.
Mm-hmm. And as you've alluded to about pay and rates and whatnot, shall we dive into that, particularly for
Yes, absolutely.
advice, particularly for people that don't know how much to charge? Once again, this is often a common conversation among, I think, a few creatives. I actually think, as you agree, we all need to do a better job of talking about it more,
Yeah,
because as we were speaking off camera, I don't actually think people consciously undercut each other for the most part. For the most part, I think people either lack self confidence in the value of their work, or they simply can't fathom that someone's charging X amount for
yeah,
taking photos because they're enjoying it. And a lot of people obviously have a job that they don't necessarily get a lot of love out of. So it seems crazy that you could not only be doing a job that you enjoy and that you love to do, and you're also getting better paid for it than you did when you were doing a crappy job that you didn't enjoy.
yeah. So there's a few different points you can like make here. Is like you're absolutely right. People probably don't undercut on purpose. They're probably doing it because they think it's like, okay, maybe I can bring in more clients by being a little bit cheaper or something like that. They're not doing it in a malicious way of going, well, I'm going to take their client by doing cheaper, because chances are you're not going to steal anybody's like long-term clients. Like I've got clients who, if someone was like, "Oh, do it for half as much as Jack would do it," then they'd be like, "No, because you're not the same." Like you could still be very good, but a lot of clients work with the same person over and over again because like of their consistency and of what they do. So you're not going to steal anyone's clients by doing that unless like you've not worked with them a lot or whatever. And if you do that, you're still not a very nice person. But yeah, you're right. No one does that. Like no one really does that at all. So it's kind of rare to see. But yeah, people need to have a little bit more self confidence and kind of value themselves a little bit. Like if you're just starting out, as in like you've maybe like been doing it for a few months, and you're like, I kind of want to start making a little bit just to like cover travel expenses or something like that. Yeah, okay, fair. Maybe charge a little bit, just maybe a little bit less than everybody else. Okay, that's fine. But it's when you get to a point where you are very like people are telling you you're very good. If your clients are constantly coming back and going, I love the photos, like you need to start charging. And I think a good base figure, like within kind of Scotland especially, I don't know about like the rest of the UK and stuff like that. I'm sure if you go to London, it just doubles because London's expensive. Glasgow's not that expensive. So like as a base rate, if you're covering a gig, you should be charging at least £100. If you're pretty good, then you should be charging at least £100. Anything less than that, you start to kind of undercut yourself, because you have to start thinking about how much is my hourly rate. If you're like doing what I do, and if you're there from like 5 o'clock all the way to 11 o'clock, and then how many hours do you spend editing the photos? You know, do you stay up to 1 o'clock in the morning when you get home and just get the photos done? Well, because first of all, you probably should just get them done for like first thing in the morning the next day, so that people can post them as soon as like they wake up. But like, think of how many hours you're spending there. So if you're from 5 o'clock at night to 1 o'clock in the morning, that's 8 hours or something like that, I think. So if you do it for 75 quid, and you've immediately just like, you're not even getting like the living wage. Like, you might as well just work at McDonald's because you make more money. If you're doing it for 100, at least then if you're spending 8 hours on something, you're getting a little bit more than like working at McDonald's. It's a little bit, it's like, and you can even go, okay, £100 is like, I'm just going to do your set. I'm going to turn up half an hour beforehand. I'm going to leave half an hour afterwards, and I'm just going to do your set. And then you spend less time on something, and your hourly rate goes up, because you need to think about that. Would you rather work in McDonald's for 8 hours and make more money, or like be a gig photographer, work 8 hours and charge a little bit more because you actually work a skilled job? Anyone can be trained to go and work at McDonald's. That's one of the appeals of working in McDonald's, is that anyone can do it. It's great. As a photographer, you have a skill and you're a creative person, so you should charge more for that skill. You know how to make people look good on stage, and they're going to use those photos or those videos to go and get more gigs and make money. So if you're not making anything off it, you're just doing yourself a favor, and you're devaluing a lot of people who charge a little bit more than you, or charge a lot more than you, because they know their worth. But by devaluing yourself and charging less, you're devaluing everybody else's work, because bands immediately see you're charging less, so that's how much photographers should be. Then they go to another photographer because you're not available, and they find out they charge twice as much as you, and they're like, well, that's stupid. And they start thinking that photographers are too expensive and useless, and it's because you've charged like way too little and totally devalued yourself. Most people are very good photographers, and they need to understand that. They're worth their money.
Mm-hmm. And not to mention, there's so many different liabilities, whether it's your subscription to Adobe to edit in Lightroom,
sure, yeah,
or it's the equipment that you've purchased. Like, those things need to be at some point paid back, in a sense, to yourself through the work that you're doing, or you're just throwing that money out the window, really.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to be able to invest in your own business. Like, how do you expect bands to want to invest in their business by hiring you if you're not going to invest in yourself? Like, there's a reason why I've like got like a whole bunch of little things like for gigs and all that. Why I've got this little LED light in me, or like why I've got like a really wide angle lens on right now. Like, I bought all these things for gigs because I wanted to be able to make more money and get more gigs and like put the quality of my work up. That's what bands are hiring you for. They're hiring you to take them to the next level visually. If you can't invest in yourself, then you can't expect them to invest in you. Like, if your work isn't getting better and better as you work with them more, and it's just staying the same, like, what's the reason to stay with you apart from you're consistently the same? Like, that's kind of it. It's like, you need to get better. It's the best way of keeping clients, is just getting better and better without them asking you to,
Definitely. And are you charging based on your time or based on the deliverables?
It's mostly kind of based on deliverables, because sometimes things take a bit more time. And if I'm, for example, like waiting on someone to give me like multi-tracks from a performance so I can mix them and link them up to the video, which is a totally different service, I feel like maybe not a lot of people do, because my background being a musician and stuff like that, I've been mixing songs since I was 15. So I'm 24 now. So I've been doing this for almost 10 years. So it's like, it's one of those things that I tend to do. But like, you could be waiting for someone to send you things, and that could all be time that you're, adding up and stuff like that. But like, the way I work is I just work going, this is what I do. And then it also allows me to kind of shut people off when it's like, can you do this and this and this and this? And it's like, I have a ceiling for how much I can actually do. I have only so much bandwidth. So it's like, okay, it's going to be this much more then. And It's just the way I prefer to work. You can charge for time and stuff like that, but then what happens if it doesn't take as long? Like, and as you get better, you should be getting quicker. You know, if you took 3 hours to edit a set of photos like a year ago, and now it takes you an hour or half an hour or something, you know, like people can get really quick at this. Cool, you've just done yourself out of money. If you're counting £20 every hour, cool, you're getting £20 for doing that set instead of 60 that you got like a year ago. Like that's the reason why. It's like I can do things quicker, and people will pay more money for me to do it quicker. Like that's kind of the reason as to why I'll like charge what I do. I'm not charging an hourly rate. I'm charging a premium for them to get the best quality, like much faster. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in those deliverables, do you have set packages? I'm wondering how many photos do you typically deliver to an artist?
So that's an interesting one because as we were saying before, is like it totally depends on like the artists themselves. Like if they're standing there for a full set, totally still, and I deliver them 40 photos looking exactly the same, they're gonna be like, "You've given me photos that are all the same." And I'm like, "Yep, unfortunately that's the case." So it really like the way I always say to artists is like it depends on like it really totally depends on how many good photos that I get. The things you can do to help me are tell the lighting engineer to give you good lights and look cool on stage. Because if there's no light and you're also not moving, then it's going to look boring and bad, and you're not going to get as many photos. But like people will ask for things like just clips of songs and stuff like that. So it's never like we need exactly this many photos, exactly this many videos. Like for the most part, when I was up again I'm going back to the tour with Nathan Evans St. Phoenix because it's a really really good example of like the different things that you can be asked for. So we started out originally going, we need 40 good photos a night, like not just like 40 photos, we need 40 really good photos. And I'm like, cool, I can do that, that's fine. And we also need like clips of songs, like video clips of different things that are going on. And they didn't set a number of clips. It was just because they kind of realized it's like photos you can make look good. Like if it's a boring gig, but people are looking kind of cool on stage, you can make photos look good. Video's a lot harder. If it's not interesting, then it's going to come across as really boring on like video. So they understood that. But then as we got in like through the gig, like just through all the gigs and the tour, I was just like, just don't worry about photos. Just like all we need is like one good photo each, like from the gig, and maybe like a crowd photo or something, and that's fine. Like the video stuff is what sells. And then I think that gig I did like maybe 20 photos and like 40 video clips. Like it all depends. I never promise anyone to get them an exact number of photos or videos. It's like I will give you lots of good quality stuff, and they just kind of have to trust that. If they ask for a certain number, I'll always do my best to hit that number. But that's generally how I work.
Mm-hmm. So let's say someone comes to you and say, Jack, we need 40 good photos.
Yeah.
How many photos actually end up on your SD card that you don't use and that you're flicking through and prioritizing in Lightroom and rating them all? How many photos do you actually end up coming away from a concert with?
My magic number used to be that I would have a 10% hit rate. So if I took 400 photos, I would get 40 good photos. And I feel like that's a really, really good hit rate. Like if you can take 400 photos and get 40 really good ones out of that, amazing. I think I'm more critical of my work nowadays because I can take like 1,200 photos and not be happy with like most of them. I would love to be able to go, here's 120 photos, 10% hit rate, sick. But quality really matters more with the clients I work with. Like if they get 30 amazing photos, then they'll be happy, as opposed to getting like 120 photos mixed in with those 30 that are actually like good, you know, like. And even personally, I would much rather get a smaller amount of photos that are just really, really good, because image is worth so much nowadays. It's the reason why so many artists don't allow like press photographers in, is because they don't know the quality of their work and they want to make themselves look really good. So yeah, image is powerful. If someone asks for a certain amount of photos, I'll try and give them that many photos and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, if I shoot 1,200 photos, I might only get 30 that I like. It all depends on kind of like what I think is good, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And do you find yourself overshooting quite consistently? when you're like, I've got too much, which then makes the whole post-production process really far longer than it necessarily needs to be? Or have you gotten better with that over time of realizing I've got what I need, I'm happy?
Yeah. I think I've gotten kind of probably worse at it, to be honest, because the great thing about the Sony A7 IV is you get to hold down the button and it just takes tons of photos. The bad thing about the Sony A7 IV is you get to hold the button, it just takes tons of photos. So I'm just sitting there kind of like, if there's lots of movement going on, or one thing that I guess people don't quite understand is like, if a singer songwriter like is singing and just singing there with a guitar, I might still hold down the button because you don't know when their facial expression is going to look really nice. Whereas like you hold down the button for a metal band for a different reason because they're moving all the time and you want to catch the right moment of movement where it looks really natural and cool. Yeah, I find myself overshooting probably quite a lot just because of that reason. But because I know what I'm looking for, it doesn't tend to slow down the process too much actually, because I'm just pressing the like the right arrow key constantly, just going, nope, face looks weird, there we go, that's the one. And then you're just like copying and pasting a preset and doing your normal kind of things that you spent years like getting into a flow state for. Like it's really easy actually. So I don't find overshooting being too much of a problem, but it definitely still happens. For
Mhm.
sure,
So let's dive into post-production and
Mhm.
talk about that process. Specifically, what softwares are you using? Are you using Lightroom, Photoshop?
My Adobe subscription is basically just like Lightroom and Photoshop. I don't use like Premiere and stuff like that. I'm more DaVinci Resolve kind of guy. I like its color grade and stuff. So for photos, it's Lightroom. Photoshop for like doing carousel posts. Like sometimes bands will ask if I can do that because I do it for myself all the time. And if I'm doing it for myself, I'm quite happy to give them that as well. Um, but that's kind of what I use for photos, as well as a plugin called Dehancer. They're essentially emulating film stocks and different things about film, so like halation, film grain, like dirt, blur, all these kind of things, and they dive into it really nerdily. So it's like you're actually applying kind of film filters to your photos. But I do it in a really weird way because I edit my photos in Lightroom with my like normal presets, and adjustments and all that, and then I'll take it into Dehancer and I'll add a whole bunch of stuff on there as well. And that's why my stuff looks so odd, where it's like you can't figure out exactly what I've done with it. It's because I've just applied two plugins like on top of each other. I guess I'm kind of used to doing like adding plugins on top of each other when it comes to like music production and stuff like that. And because it is part of my job, I guess I should say like Reaper is what I use for like mixing and mastering and recording and stuff like that. I'm starting to do more and more of it now this year, especially. So like I just use Reaper. I've always used it. I've used it since I was like 16. So that's what I use, and it's still great. And yeah, DaVinci is also what I use for video and stuff like that as well. I don't think I have any plugins for DaVinci Resolve actually. So everything I do, you can quite easily do within DaVinci Resolve yourself. Like DaVinci Resolve's free for the most part, like, or it's 200 quid or something like that for the license. Like, it's great. Yeah.
Mhm. And how has your personal style and aesthetic, particularly of your photos, evolved over time? Like you say, you've
Mm,
got the grain, you've got halation, you've got like a lot of glow and things
yeah.
like that. I feel like I often will come across your photos in my feed, and it is like, that's a Jack photo. Like
Yeah.
I know he took that. And how has that evolved over time? Was that just practice? Was that just figuring out what you like and you don't like?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I mean, I have like there's photographers that inspire me and stuff like that. And I really like some of the things they do, but I find that what I'll do is I'll go, I really like that. Let's see if I can do that my way. So I don't ever like go and ask, oh, how do you do that one thing and try and do it exactly the way they did it. I always go, how can I try and emulate this in my kind of way and way that I really like it? Because I'm not gonna, because I don't get offended if someone goes and copies me and does it better than me. I'm like, cool, I need to be better. Like if someone goes and does the exact same thing that I do and they do it better than me, good on them. I need to get better then. That's great. It's a great drive for me to go and do something better. And I see that with my friends all the time where we're like taking things from each other and someone does it better and I'm like, cool, now I need to be better. if someone takes something from me and tries to copy exactly what I did and they do worse, I'm just like, cool, now you've just done a shit job. Like, like, cool, now you're just being a discount me. I don't need another me from Timu. Like, come on. Like, so I get more annoyed when people do a shit job of it. If they copy me and they do it way better than me, brilliant. That's a great. That actually really drives me to get better. But yeah, it's just been like years of just working on what I like. I've never looked at it going, oh, I really want to be like someone else. I'm just like, how can I make this look the way that I can see it in my head? And it's only been more recently where I've actually been like, now I'm finally getting exactly what I want. Like the halation and stuff like that has been something I've been chasing for years, and it was this dehancer plugin that has really like brought that out. So no, it's yeah, it's just been years of just trying to be myself. I don't like being like everybody else, so I just want to be different, you know.
Mm-hmm. And how do you find that it helps with clients? Because your style is so specific and so you
Mm-hmm.
that clients come to you knowing that we're either getting this style or nothing. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
Jack's thing, but you have a
Mm-hmm.
very distinct aesthetic.
Yeah,
So how do you find that helps with clients or just with identifying you as a personal brand and that you have a
yeah.
clear.
I think what the biggest thing is that identifying kind of like them as a personal brand, because like you said, I think people see my photos and they immediately, if they know my photos, they immediately like, yep, that's Jack's photos. I've had that happen on a like occasion like a couple of years ago. I took photos of My Chemical Romance when they played the Hydro, which is my biggest flex to this day, to be honest. That was really cool. And I'm not the biggest fan of the photos, but I can appreciate how cool it was, the fact that I got to stand there for once. Like that was awesome. But because of the big fan base, like people will like they'll take screenshots of your photos and share them online, like on Tumblr and stuff like that. Tumblr still exists apparently, and they're sharing my photos. And someone shared it on Twitter, and I didn't have Twitter, so my friends from like all the way back from like primary school, like she messaged me and went, "Is this your photo? It looks like one of yours." And I was like, "Yep." She was like, "You shot my camera." It's like, yeah, yeah. So that happens from time to time, and they even made like fan art of it and stuff like that. And that was honestly that was the coolest thing. Like if someone takes my photo and does like fan art, like it's happened maybe twice, like in all the years I've done it. But that's honestly the coolest thing.
Yeah, totally. Are there any other artists that come to mind alongside My Chemical Romance that were like these
Mm,
I've made it moments or like, oh, this is really a career milestone
yeah.
is getting to photograph these
So,
artists?
so I mean, I've already mentioned my chem. Like that's a pretty huge one. The first time I was like, "Oh my god, this is huge," was when I shoot YungBlud at the Barrowlands, and basically, I've got another story about YungBlud in a wee second actually, but it was one of those moments where I was like, "Oh my god, that's YungBlud on stage." Like he's obviously a big kind of like alternative kind of like rock gods, I guess. Like very cool guy, and we're during one point during the songs, he ran across the stage and he's very good with interacting with photographers. And he looked straight down the barrel of my camera lens and was just and like sang into the lens. And I was just holding down the button for dear life, going, please get this. He ran off across the rest of the stage and I looked immediately and I was like, yes. That was the moment where I was like, okay, that's really cool. And I've got like a full circle moment there because Saint Phoenix were supporting, and obviously I worked with them recently, so and friends with those guys now, so that was really cool. That was probably another kind of like moment where I was like, oh shit, that's cool. The side story to that, which is not to answer the question, but I got these big massive studio speakers. They're Yamaha HS8s. They're absolutely massive and ridiculous, and I don't need something that big, but they sound great. When I went to go buy them off Facebook Marketplace, I went to this guy's house, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm just getting rid of them." My brother gave me them, and I was like, "Oh cool, like he's a musician." It's like, "Yeah, yeah, he's like a session musician." So, "Oh, has he played with anyone that I've heard of?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, he plays with YungBlud." And I was like, "No way, no." So I like he's basically YungBlud's guitarist is Scottish. And he's from Glasgow, and yeah. So I was just like, I can't believe I've just and apparently these are used to belong to him. So I'm just like, I can't believe I've just bought his speakers. So I was like, bizarre. Music industry is tiny, by the way. If anyone hasn't noticed, it is really, really small. So you meet one person, they probably know like Snoop Dogg or something like that. Honestly, genuinely, it's true. It's so true. Like that's how it works. You're only a couple people away from knowing Snoop Dogg, man. Like,
yeah, boom. Other noteworthy people that you have photographed is Billie Eilish,
yes,
1975.
yeah, I got to shoot there. I got to shoot both of them at Leeds Festival last year. Yeah.
So actually, on that note, how does concert photography differ to festival photography?
Oh, that's a really good question. The first thing I guess is it's a really long day. Like you're there from like 10 in the morning until like 11 o'clock at night. It's like you could be there even earlier or even later, depending on who you're working for and like what your job is. Like it's a long day and get lots of steps in. Like you're thinking you're doing an arena show, like you're doing lots of steps. You try and do like Leeds Festival or something like that. I didn't even do Reading. I did Leeds, so I did the very slightly smaller one, and that was a bit like that was insane. So long days, lots of steps, exposed to the elements, as I found out at download this year. Literally, there was points where like there was just rivers of mud, and I was like walking through this with a big camera bag. I had my laptop in it, and I'm like, oh god, it's like so that yeah, it's like they're just particularly long days, and you also have to deal with weird lighting situations because people will be on the main stage in the middle of the day. They've got stage lighting, but they've also got all the sun out. So you're dealing with some really strange kind of things. Like the lights on stage aren't quite bright enough to to overpower the sun, but they're also bright enough that they add to the exposure and to like the color and stuff like that on them. So it can be a little bit odd there, but it also means like no high ISO. Like you're like right down at 100 ISO, like in the middle of the day, and get some really cool photos from like stages when the sun's hitting it right. Yeah, like festivals are just a long day with like some kind of odd lighting scenarios and stuff like that. Yeah, they're good fun though. They're like as much as they're a really long like weekend, you can make so many friends in that weekend, like who are all just there because they love taking photos of bands and stuff like that. And that's what Leeds Festival was like last year. That was amazing. So yeah.
And are you just staying in a tent like everyone else, or do you have your own
Ooh,
wee?
it depends. So well, I've done a few festivals for Ticketmaster, and part of them getting me in through press is they actually allow press to camp in certain areas. So they'll have like guest camping, which will be for like guests of the festival. So say your pal is the promoter or whatever, and you get guest tickets or whatever, you're camping in the guest camping. So it means that you get like access to these areas that have nicer facilities. So if people are there to work for like newspapers or for Ticketmaster, in my case, there are showers, there are like good toilets, there's like little huts that give you coffee in the morning, like so there's nice things like that. But you are in a tent. That's the only downside. And honestly, see if I did festivals more often, I would absolutely just buy a camper van. Like it would be so much better because you're trudging all the tent stuff along. But as long as it's not really raining all the time, it's actually not too bad. Just bring earplugs. That's what I would say. But yeah.
And is that a note generally for concerts? Because
Oh,
one of the
absolutely. Yeah.
very few concerts that I've ever filmed was Callum Beattie was doing a concert
Mm.
for Keyring in Glasgow.
Yeah.
So I was part of the video team for that with Mallard Productions.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, my ears were ringing, and I was like, "Oh, I really wish I brought earphones." So obviously, if you're doing this day in day out,
Mm-hmm.
are you wearing earphones throughout the whole show?
Pretty much. So I used to use those. I think you've seen them before. They're called loops. So they're little like circular kind of earplugs with a little hole in them, and they're supposed to be like high quality earplugs so you can hear the music well, whilst also not damaging your hearing. They're all right, to be honest. They're a little bit overpriced. What I tend to use actually, I've got them right here. So I've got kind of in-ear monitors, and they're a little bit dirty looking. They're a little bit horrible, but they're basically just like in-ear kind of like headphones with big foam inserts on them. So it means that they block out as much sound as possible. And one of the big benefits of that when you start doing bigger gigs with bands who are using in-ear monitoring packs is they can bring an extra one for you and you can hear exactly what they hear no matter where you are in the venue. And it's happened once, and it was magical. So yeah, they're great. They're great to have, and also if you're walking back to your car, you're walking back to the train station or something like that, you've got earphones on you anyway. You don't have to take anything else, so they're handy for that. And you look very professional. They're going, you're wearing in ears? No, they're not connected to anything. You with the band? Yeah, I'm with the band. I'm with the band. Yeah. So yeah, ear protection's a big thing. People need to be wearing ear protection. Gigs get up to like 110 decibels, which is like the same as a jet. So you need to be wearing ear protection. Like, don't lose your hearing. Not worth it. Like, you love music, keep your hearing intact, you know.
For sure. During a concert, how much time do you find yourself actually simply enjoying the music?
Whenever I've kind of got free time, I guess. Like, if I'm working for artists, it's like I'm not necessarily working with artists that like are playing music within the genres that I really like. Like, I'm a wee goth. I like my metal stuff. I like bands like Knocked Loose and stuff like that. Like, so if I'm shooting a band like that, then I'll find a moment to enjoy it, and I'll be in the pit going, yeah, like and just enjoying the music while I'm shooting it. But like there'll be times where I'll be like working with like friends who I just really appreciate their music a lot, and I'll just be there in the pit, kind of like singing along and stuff. I don't think that's cringe to be like, if you're working for an artist, if you're singing along with their songs and stuff like that. Like that just shows you're enjoying it. That's just fun. It's a little bit different if you're like in the pit for an artist that you really love as a press photographer or something like that, and you're jumping up and down and dancing and like kind of acting like more of a fan in the pit. That's a bit like, okay, need to be a little bit professional for 3 songs, then go into the pit, like into the actual audience, and just enjoy it from there. Like, be professional for those first 3 songs, enjoy yourself, but be professional. You know, like. But I was finding myself like singing along to like a lot of Nathan's songs on tour, like Driving to Nowhere and stuff like that. I think it was the crew's favorite song, so we were all like dancing along to that song whenever it was on. It was good. Yeah.
Great. I honestly think there's so much value and actionable tips that you've given throughout this episode. So I think just to round off, I've got a few quick fire questions for you.
Oh, here we go.
So, first camera that you were shooting on, do you feel like equipment's overrated? Do you feel like, particularly nowadays, you can just get started with anything?
So my first camera was a Canon 200D. In terms of photos wise, well, it's not ideal. I think you can still take good photos with it. There are limitations and you have to work within them, but limitations create art. So that's my opinion on that. Um, Gear makes things easier. It doesn't necessarily make things better all the time, unless we're talking about 8-bit versus 10-bit video, in which case it does make things considerably better. So it all depends on what you're doing. If you're doing photos, you just need a DSLR with decent autofocus and the ability to make raw photos. If you want to do video and you want to color grade it, please buy something with 10-bit color because it makes things so much easier. But yeah.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Artists, bands, festivals that you want to work at or with in the future? Is there any one that sticks out that you're like, they're on the hit list?
In terms of bands, the biggest band I could think of would be Muse. I grew up listening to Muse, and I would love to do photos for them at some point. And I think I could do a really good job of all the content, to be honest, because I know their entire catalog. So there's that. Also, there's a
Muse,
band
if you're
called
listening, you know.
yeah, Matt Bellamy. If you're listening, I have one of your signature guitars, and I know your entire set list. And I'm actually really good, so you should hire me. So yeah. Also a band called Thornhill. They're an Australian band. They're an Australian kind of metalcore band. They're really cool. And I think my style suits their musical style really well. So I think if they come here, again, they should hire me. So yeah, like festivals, I want to work for Download Festival for sure. If I could get in next year, like working for them, I think I would do an amazing job for them, and I would love to do that festival because I shot it last year for the band called Low Lives, American band, and that was awesome. Like I would love to just be able to work for the festival because it's such a cool festival. Was it artist festivals? Just
Yeah,
like
that was
is that,
all.
is that
That was
okay?
good.
Cool.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
good answer.
My memory's helping me. It's all good.
And finally, one piece of advice that you wish you knew 2-3 years ago.
that's a really good one. Let's see. One piece of advice I knew. That's a really good bit of question, because I've got advice I could say to myself, like, but when it comes to like people giving me advice and stuff, like, I guess I've not really asked for it, so I don't tend to have a lot of it in mind. I've worked out a lot of things myself, but I think if I was to give it, like, I'm gonna treat this as like if I was gonna give someone a bit of advice, I would say, do what you like to do, and like don't do anything because someone else wants you to do it. Don't go for like your clean white like wedding look if you don't like doing that. If you want to do something else, or maybe you do like doing that, do that. It's cool. Do what you want to do with your style, and if you like it, people will come along and they will like it too. Like, it will happen. Just don't do what anybody else says for the sake of the fact that they told you to do it. Just do it because you want to, and you will get clients out of it, because there will be people with the same attitude as you and the same sense of style as you who will want to hire you for that. It's not like you're in a corporate industry where they look for specific things. You know, they're like, okay, we need to hit these points, these points, these points. It is very much a totally creative industry. You're working with creative people. Be creative, do what you like to do, and the rest will come.
Amazing. I think that's the perfect note to end on.
There we go.
So thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of the Not a Scooby podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a good time.